Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be resetting the Buffalo Bills defense. Who are the cornerstone players? What will the camp battles look like? What positions could still be addressed before September? We dive into all those questions and more. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
Bills Mafia, welcome in to another episode of the Air Raid Hour. Tonight, we are going to be resetting the Buffalo Bills defense. Brandon Beane has gone to work retooling this defensive unit. A lot of veteran leadership has walked out the door. So tonight, Dave, our job is to sort of figure out what is left, what has been added, and put this roster back together.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of attention throughout free agency and throughout the draft obviously was focused on that wide receiver position and ultimately Keon Coleman, but really a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball, more so than even the offensive side of the ball. New starters at safety, new starters on the defensive line, or at least new major contributors, I should say, on the defensive line, and some pretty big investments in free agency as well on the back end. So it'll be interesting. A lot to cover here for the defense.
So let's get right into it, and let's start with the defensive line. We'll start with edge rusher. Returning to the Buffalo Bills in 2024, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Von Miller, Kingsley Jonathan, and Cameron Klein. Free agent additions include Casey Toohill and Dwayne Smoot, and the Buffalo Bills drafted Javon Solomon in the 5th round of the NFL draft. There's a couple of UDFAs as well who have not yet officially signed their contracts. That is Rondell Bothroyd and David Ogwegbu. So the Buffalo Bills edge rushers, I'll tell you what, looking at this list here, Rousseau and Epinesa, they were both banged up last year. They're healthy this year. I think that they're both going to be workhorses in 2024, because I'll tell you what, I'm not too inspired by the depth behind them. And I think these two young guys could both hit their ceilings in 2025. I am rather optimistic about those two. Everything behind it, I am very much not.
Yeah, and the Bills had an interesting approach to this position group in the offseason, right? They obviously made it a priority to bring back Epinesa, and really glad they did, right? A lot of people just assumed that he was gone, right? And that the Bills wouldn't be able to re-sign him. There was a thought maybe the Bills would try to bring back Leonard Floyd. Turns out AJ Epinesa ended up being cheaper on a per-year basis than Leonard Floyd got from the 49ers, and you can't blame him for taking that paycheck. So Rousseau and Epinesa return as the young guns, the starters. The Bills picking up the 5th-year option on Rousseau, no surprise there. And Epinesa getting the contract in the offseason. These guys are going to have to be workhorses, right? Because you still have question marks about Von Miller behind him. You have question marks about not necessarily Dwayne Smoot's abilities, but major injuries in his past. Casey Toohill primarily been a rotational guy and has some nice things working for him, mostly on the effort side. You know, how far is that going to take him? And then you have Von Miller, right? Who is really the wild card in all of this, who could end up gluing this whole group together, or could be the reason that this group doesn't, achieve what it needs to achieve this year. So, and then, the depth. Kingsley Jonathan's been in the system for a number of years now, or a couple years now. He's not really become a thing yet. And then another wild card, the Javon Solomon pick in the draft. I liked it. He can learn behind Von Miller, but expecting anything major out of him from his first year might be a bit premature. Although I will say, not to give it away, I do think he's going to make the team.
Yeah.
Although I think most people probably figure he will.
I'll tell you what though, like just one injury, either to the edge or to the interior, to Rousseau, Epinesa, or Oliver, man, like it just really changes the complexion of this group. I,
Yep.
I it's kind of scary because Miller, we've had this conversation before. Like at this point, the Bills are just crossing their fingers and hoping that Von Miller can match Leonard Floyd's production last year.
Yep.
But even then, you're still going to have to limit him because of age. We even saw Leonard Floyd get burnt out towards the end of last year.
Yep.
And behind Miller, it's Smoot versus Toohill versus Solomon versus Jonathan, and it's likely one of the vets, Smoot or Toohill, is going to make the team, and then one of the younger guys, Solomon or Jonathan, is going to make the team. It's not exactly awe-inspiring talent,
Mhm.
even though I like a guy like Javon Solomon, even though I like when healthy a guy like Dwayne Smoot. I guess the Buffalo Bills have just been so spoiled with edge depth the last couple of years. I guess this is more just like looking at reality and not understanding reality because of that.
Yeah, and also realizing that you're kind of hamstrung a bit by what you're paying Von Miller, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's actually like a minor miracle the Bills were able to bring back AJ Epinesa. Could you imagine what this room would have looked like if they hadn't been able to bring back Epinesa? I mean, it would have been like
Shaq
Casey
Lawson would be
Toohill,
here right
yeah,
now.
Shaq I mean, Casey Toohill at one point probably would have been penciled in as a starter, right? That's how
Yeah.
bad it would have looked until, like, obviously they bring in Smoot. I do like that they're
Mhm.
continuously looking at this position by with the Smoot signing being
Mhm.
quite recent. So Brandon Beane not resting on what he's got in the room, investing in the draft with Solomon, signing Smoot recently.
Mhm.
It's an island of misfit toys a little bit here
Yeah.
with this group. And you're right, like the health of Epinesa and Rousseau this year is absolutely paramount.
And you're betting too on coaching. You're betting on development here. Obviously Eric Washington is out. Marcus West is in. I can see a world where maybe Javon Solomon contributes right away. They use Rousseau and Epinesa on early downs, and they just hear like, "Hey, Javon Solomon, we know you're not an NFL caliber, run defender, first, second down player right now, but when it's 3rd and 13, you're going to be out in the field every time." Like
Mhm.
I could see
I
a
don't
world
hate
where
it.
that
I don't hate
happens.
it even with I mean,
Um, so that's probably gonna be the plan with a guy like Von Miller too. Like I can
mhm.
envision Smoot or so Epinesa being the guys who take a lot of the early down snaps. And that's why I think Rousseau and Epinesa are just gonna be the workhorses this year because it's hard to imagine any of these guys taking early run defending downs outside of the starters. That's the one thing where when you get to preseason, when you get to week 1, week 2, that's what I'm gonna have my eye on is like just how do they even rotate these guys? Because after Rousseau and Epinesa, it just seems like a lot of like pass rushy type, not a lot of edge setting type. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and you look at Rousseau's sort of snap count percentages his first 3 years, 49% as a rookie, 56, and then up to 60 in 2023, which
With a
still
broken
seems
foot. With a
yeah,
broken foot.
I mean, I just don't it would shock me
Mhm.
if he went anything above 65, just given, like,
Yeah.
the way that the Bills rotate, like, I feel like that 60 to 65 range is probably gonna be the max for him,
Mhm.
um,
I'm
even though,
I'm
like,
just
Bill
I'm just worried that the three guys, Epinesa, Rousseau, Oliver, they're gonna come like bats out of hell. They're gonna have a really good first half of the season, and then they're just gonna fall off a cliff because they're just gonna get burnt out.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I mean, look, Epinesa has some room for growth, right? He's
Mhm.
averaged between 30 and 40% snap share. Obviously, last year was kind of his more of a coming
Mhm.
out party. It was his first year breaking 40% on average or 40% snaps on defense. He'd been at 38, 37, 31 as a rookie. So there is some room for Epinesa to
Mhm.
increase his snap count, and he's gonna have to, right? I think he's gonna kind of have to probably be in that 60% range like Rousseau will be because you certainly expect that those are going to be your two early down edge players, especially given their Rousseau, you know, Rousseau is like essentially going to have maybe play like I don't know, man. It's just like these two guys are going to have to play early downs like every single
Mhm.
time out there. I just don't know that. And then if Von Miller's not going to play 30, 40% of the snaps, who's it going to be? Is it going to be
Mhm.
Smoot and Solomon? And then when do you use Von Miller? Like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a lot of question marks for me with this group.
Mhm. And then you look at the interior. The interior's got Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, and Ilianku returning. They have free agent additions of Austin Johnson and Deshaun Williams. They drafted Dwayne Carter, and then they have the unreported UDFA signing of someone named Branson Dean, who is a person who exists. Apparently went to the University of Miami. Never heard of him. It wasn't exactly a stellar cast of UDFAs the Buffalo Bills signed, but if you look at it, Oliver Jones and Johnson, and Carter, the top four are locks. Austin Johnson got like a fully guaranteed deal. He's not going anywhere. And then Dwayne Carter, obviously, as a third round pick, is a lock as well. I think the question is, and it takes defensive tackles longer to develop, will they keep a fifth? And if they do, right now on paper, it looks like it's going to be Deshaun Williams. But I think the Bills need to add some more bodies here in June when some money frees up, because the competition for like practice squad, possible fifth spot on the D line rotation doesn't really seem particularly fierce. As I mentioned earlier, one injury really changes the complexion of this room. It's like you look at this room in the top four right now and you go, yeah, that makes sense. Oliver Carter at 3 tech, Jones Johnson at 1 tech. Oliver gets hurt, it just looks completely different. Jones gets hurt, it just looks completely different. Like your total attitude changes about this room. Again, we had an embarrassment of riches along the defensive interior for the years past. Even if you didn't love the player, you knew that they were like NFL rosterable caliber players. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about guys like Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle in the past, right? And now you're talking
Mhm.
about this is going to come down to like Deshaun Williams and Eli Anku. Like, but you
Mhm.
don't really have anybody else even for competition at this point, other than Branson Dean, who's the reported UDFA signing.
Yeah.
But
Maybe
I mean, you
Branson
got to
Dean just
think.
is the next Aaron Donald. Like we just completely
Yeah,
underselling him.
I mean, it feels like you probably need to add at least one, maybe even two more guys before
Yeah.
August on this one. But because like the last thing you need
Mhm.
with it being this shallow is one of these guys getting hurt before the season starts, right? I mean
Yeah.
that would be absolutely killer.
And I think another thing too, carrying 5 edges and 5 D tackles makes sense to me. 10 guys. The Bills have done it before. They've carried 10 guys along the defensive line. There is a chance that Ed Oliver gets, or not Ed Oliver, excuse me. There is a chance that Von Miller gets suspended. So they had that conversation when the Bills and Von Miller reworked that contract. They turned a bunch of guarantees into performance-based bonuses. And everyone's like, wow, Von Miller, he's taking one for the team. He really loves the team. He wants to win, blah, blah, blah. In reality, Von Miller was bracing for a suspension because all those guarantees go away once you're suspended. And at least he could earn them back theoretically if he comes back from suspension and plays well. So there's that looming over the Bills too. Maybe Von Miller at some point in the season, maybe early on in the season, he wasn't even part of the rotation.
Mm.
I guess we wouldn't have to carry 6 guys because Vaughn would be technically inactive, but there could be a spot on the roster for Smoot and Tuhill if Von Miller is suspended early on as well. But then all these things could play a role on carrying a fifth defensive tackle. A lot of things, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to juggle come August.
I think 5 DTs is got to happen. I think
Mhm.
Williams to me is got an inside track probably to make the team, got a ton of experience, played in a ton of games over the last several years. I just don't feel like you turn that away with the
Mhm.
situation the Bills have found themselves in, especially come playoff time, right on
Yeah.
this defensive line has not performed. So a guy like
Mhm.
Williams in the mix to me,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep.
as a Tim Settley, Jordan Phillips type of guy, like I think maybe a little better than those guys,
Mhm.
but
And who knows,
I'd keep 5.
maybe the Buffalo Bills were like, yeah, we agree with you, but we can just put him on the practice squad and still get that from
True.
him. Because I don't know. I don't know if a guy like Deshaun Watson would have much of a market if he was waived, or he's probably a veteran by now at this point. The Bills can just cut him, put him on the street, and then bring him back on the practice squad if they'd like. All right, we're
Mhm.
going to get into linebacker in a moment. But before we do, this show is sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, on to the linebacker position. Returning to the Buffalo Bills in 2024, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, and Balon Spector. The Buffalo Bills added Nicholas Morrow and Deion Jones in free agency. And this is the first time I'm actually going to speak this name out loud, so I hope I don't butcher it. They drafted in the 5th round Edafon Ulufosio out of the University of Washington. So 7 linebackers currently right now on the Bills roster, headlined by Milano and Bernard. Looking forward to seeing both of those guys back on the field together again.
Yeah, and a lot of like rumors swirling around, like, well, why would the Bills bring in Deion Jones and Matt Milano? Like, I'm not really gonna get into that yet, but I did respond. I know you were doing a really good job of like power ranking each position group for the Bills over the last several days, and like got to the linebacker one, and man, what a difference a couple years make. The
Mm-hmm.
fear of losing Tremaine Edmonds and what that was going to mean for this linebacker room. And now looking at this room top to bottom, might be the best position group the Bills have on the entire roster, top to bottom, between Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. Terrell Bernard probably should or could have been an all-pro last year. Matt Milano is a former all-pro. Those two guys healthy. The Bills got absolutely smoked in that playoff game by Travis Kelce because they
Mm-hmm.
had to bring in guys like AJ Klein off the street to play linebacker. I like what they're doing with this group. They're saying we're going to find guys that can run in space, can do a little bit for us in the run game, can rush like it's a really athletic and intriguing group to me, and I really like this group top to bottom. And
Mm-hmm.
until I hear anything about Milano, I'm just going to assume that he's going to be back 100% ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Deion Jones, this is like a Traven Howard style insurance signing to me because you mentioned what happened in the playoffs last year. I'm still convinced we beat the Kansas City Chiefs if we have a healthy Milano and Bernard in that game. We finally got them in our home stadium. I think we had them on the ropes. I think 2 healthy linebackers would have put us over the top. So having Deion Jones, even if like he's just the AJ Klein sitting on the practice squad all year long, sort of break glass and type of emergency, and we roll with the other 6, I'm
Mm,
completely comfortable with that. I mean, Balon Spector, he has
same.
his supporters. He showed promise. He just can't stay on the field. So maybe he ends up cut and put on the practice squad just because he cannot be depended upon. Then maybe carry 5, or then maybe Deion Jones makes your roster. But I still like the upside of Spector. Obviously, Ulufosio, he's on a rookie deal, 5th round pick. You're not going to want to cut him. You're going to want to roster him. His scouting report just says like this guy was born to, run and chase and hit people and play special teams. So I'd really like the idea of Olufosio and Spector as your 5 and 6. And I feel disgustingly confident in our direct backups, the linebacker position. You look at Nicholas Morrow, he's very athletically similar to Terrell Bernard. Like they're practically clones. And I think that Nicholas Morrow has been around the block. He's played in a lot of NFL games. And if there is a defensive coach like Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott, if he gets plugged in and has to play the Terrell Bernard role because Terrell Bernard sprains his ankle and misses 3-4 weeks, I feel confident that Nicholas Morrow can step in there and do an adequate job. And then behind Matt Milano, who's had an injury history, obviously, year 2, Dorian Williams. We all remember year 2, Terrell Bernard, right? I think
Mm,
Dorian Williams could have a similar bump. I just don't think he's going to have the chance to play if Milano's healthy. Brandon Bean at the post-draft press conference for Dorian Williams was like, this guy came from a very vanilla scheme at Tulane. Our system is very complex. He's got to learn it. It's going to take time. He's not going to get on the field a lot as a rookie. He ended up getting on the field a lot as a rookie because of injuries, and it showed his lack of ability to know where to be in coverage and things like that. He's now got a full off season to figure that out. The guy is an athletic freak. I think Morrow behind Bernard and Williams behind Milano. I'm disgustingly confident in those 4 guys. And then I even like the 2 guys behind him as well. Like 3 deep of guys that I feel like, again, you want your 2 studs out there. But if Bernard's going to miss a week, if Milano's going to miss a week, I feel confident in those 4 or 5 guys behind them to step in and fill those void for a short amount of time.
And top to bottom, there is no question about this group athletically, right?
Mhm,
All of these guys are really good athletes. And I love what you said about Williams because he went through his growing pains last year, did get the playing time, which I think ultimately is going to be a benefit to him. But you did see the flashes at times last year with some of the hits and some of his ability to run sideline to sideline. Like you could see it. You could see it with Williams. So look,
mhm,
it is nice to have that. I think that this is an interesting position, sort of like the NFL over the last 7 to 10 years is kind of like I would say somewhat devalued the linebacker position, but I feel like it's kind of maybe coming back a little bit. Maybe in 2024 we see a
mhm,
little bit of a return to prominence of maybe not necessarily the traditional sort of jacked up like you know um, neck brace sort of padded up like linebacker guys that you saw in the past, but like really important for coverage, really important like all around to be able to get into the
mhm,
passer, play the run. Like it is a still very important position, and especially to this Bills defense, right? Where they play the two linebackers. And so I'm excited about this group this year. Definitely more confident about the depth top to bottom than I have been in years past. And yeah, I'm excited to see kind of how things play out for,
mhm.
you know, who's going to be that second wave in. Is it going to be Williams and Morrow? I certainly would expect that to be the case right now.
Shifting focus now to the cornerback position. On the boundary, returning for the Buffalo Bills in 2024, Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam, Jamarcus Ingram, and Kyron Brown. There's the unreported UDFA, Kenai H. Lovely. What a wonderful name that is. And then at the nickel spot, you have Teron Johnson returning. You drafted Daquan Hardy in the 6th round, and you got another great name here, an unreported UDFA, to Corey Couch. So that is what the Buffalo Bills have at cornerback. Literally lost Trey Whites, lost Dane Jackson, and have replaced them with 6th round pick and 2 UDFAs. That is where we stand in the Buffalo Bills cornerback room. Douglas and Benford, they're your starters on day one of training camp. Then there's the reclamation of Kyer Elam, which I'm confident in as your cornerback 3, who might even be a guy who could compete to be a starting corner in 2025 when Douglas's contract is up. That's how confident I am that maybe Jamil Adai and Bobby Babich and some changes to this defensive scheme can get this guy back on the right track. Maybe that's some uh, irrational optimism, but the optimism is there. But then after that, it's Ingram versus Brown versus Kenny H. Lovely. Is the Jamarcus Ingram sort of transition from practice squad to active roster, that little path the Bills like to have players on that we talked about on Monday's show, is that the move here? Is he boundary CB4? Or do you think we're going to see a veteran addition at some point in June?
Well, I mean, as it stands right now, it's like he's the de facto CB4, right? I mean, you'd have to
Mm-hmm.
put him on the team right now as it stands. So Chris Jenke will get his wish that Jamarcus Ingram will make the team. But
I
there,
wouldn't mind it. The youth movement continues. I've liked what I've seen from him in the preseason, but I just don't know if the Bills are going to be okay with that.
yeah, I mean this room is shaky. I would say, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
like a year ago when you had obviously Trey wasn't injured at the start of the season, but you had Trey, you didn't have Douglas at that point, but you had Elam, you had Benford, um, you had Dane Jackson still, who I think people don't really give enough like credit to that security blanket that Dane Jackson was for this team, and he's gone, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that it's it's shallow now, I think, behind Benford and Douglas, right? I mean, I I love where your head's at with Elam, and I like in my heart hope,
Mm-hmm.
man, I hope he really turns out to be a super solid like CB3 at worst and like potential
Yeah.
starter, right? Obviously is ideal, but I am a little bit nervous about this group. I do love
I
that they addressed the slot backup. I thought they
mhm,
might address a boundary backup as well in the draft.
mhm.
They did not, but there are guys out there still in free agency.
I wonder too if the Buffalo Bills plan is Kyer and Demarcus Ingram, just give them all the snaps in the world in training camp, in OTAs. Hey, you're our second team boundary corners and you're our third team boundary corners. Like you're going to be getting all the snaps you can handle this June, this
Mm.
July, this August. Because I feel like, too, and again, I haven't peeped the names of free agent corners available right now. I'd assume it's not pretty, but guess what? It might get prettier in August around cut down day. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, all right, Jamarcus, all right, Kyer, we're going to give you guys all the opportunities under the sun. And if you guys don't show up and make us feel comfortable, we're just going to go hit the waiver wire in August or sign a veteran that's cut in August. And we feel confident in our defensive coaching staff that we can work them in over the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks, and they'll be our CB3 or they'll be our CB4, by the end of September. I wouldn't be shocked if that might be the plan of action here for the Buffalo Bills.
No, I'm just looking at who's available on
Oh,
the
God.
market. You got
Josh Norman.
your favorite guy to bring up, Daryl Worley, is available.
It's getting
I mean,
bad.
there's some guys out there, but they're gonna be holding out for some cash.
Mm.
So, JC Jackson is out there, Cameron Sutton,
Well,
Patrick
Cameron
Peterson.
Sutton's going to jail. So Cameron
Oh yeah.
Sutton's the
Let's see. Eli Apple
longest
is
yard.
available.
Sorry,
Your
Cameron
favorite.
Sutton.
Your favorite. It's not
So
looking. It's
yeah,
not great out there. It's not great out there.
I think if we did defensive tackle, this exercise would be very similar as well. But you mentioned the depth of nickel. That's a little less scary because
Yes.
there are some options behind Taron Johnson. There's Daquan Hardy. There's Cam Lewis. Mike Edwards even, right? Like if Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp are your starting safeties, Mike Edwards can get into the mix as sort of a nickel backup as well. Hardy, I think he's got a good path to making the roster, even as a 6th-round pick, because I think he can be the backup nickel. A lot of people are now going back to his tape and saying, listen, it's limited, but he has some really good nickel film at Penn State. He could be the backup nickel. Plus, he could be the return man. He could be the punt return man, or at
Yep.
least a backup emergency return man as well. So I really like Daquan Hardy. I think the Bills hit a home run there as a guy, as a 6th-round pick who has a path to make the 53-man roster this year.
I'm penciling him in right now as it
Mhm.
stands, right? Saran
Yep.
gone. You don't really have that guy unless maybe you say Cam Lewis is that guy, but I figure he's going to end up being probably taking one of the quote safety spots on this team. But I like Daquan Hardy. I like what he can bring as a punt returner. He's fast, the 4.38 40
Mhm.
time. I think that the Bills really needed to get a true backup for Taron Johnson, and I think that Hardy can be that guy. I'm penciling him in right now on the
Mhm.
roster.
Looking at the safety position now, all the talk we did with safeties this year, Dave, this offseason, the Bills currently have 2 new safeties on their roster. Taylor Rapp, Cam Lewis, DeMar Hamlin, Kendall Williamson all return. And the only new additions, free agent Mike Edwards and rookie 2nd-round pick Cole Bishop. The
Mhm.
Bills like to split their safeties, but let's be real. Micah Hyde was always more of the center fielder, and Jordan Poyer was always more of the line of scrimmage guy. And right now, it feels like the Buffalo Bills have 3 Jordan Poyers in
Yep.
Mike Edwards, in Taylor Rapp, in Cole Bishop. They can center field, but it isn't their strength. The most likely to center field, I would say Mike Edwards. I think it would be a mistake if it was Cole Bishop. Could we see a Micah Hyde return? Brandon Bean left the door open. My hope is that the Bills will use some June money or find some June money to get Justin Simmons to come to Buffalo. I think those are some options. I was really high on Kalen Bullock because I felt like that center fielding trait was missing from the safety room.
Yep.
I feel like it's still missing. So that's what I'm struggling with right now when I look at this depth chart.
And it's something I've brought up on this show a number of times, even on
Mhm.
past roster iterations that this team has had, whether it's like Taylor Rapp, Damar Hamlin, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. It was like a 3-and-1. It was like you had kind of 3
Mhm.
guys who were better, kind of more around the line of scrimmage. Obviously, Jordan Poyer could do a little bit of more of that, and Rapp, when absolutely had to, he did. But like at that time, Micah Hyde was still the only real true center fielder. Now or then as well. And so you're kind of seeing that take shape again with the way they're making up this
Mhm.
group, where you have like 3-in-1 situation again with a guy like Taylor Rapp, if need be, could play in the back end, right? Because you
Mhm.
could end up seeing maybe a situation where maybe you have 3 safeties on the field and you have Rapp, Edwards, and Bishop on the field at the same time. I wouldn't be opposed to a Micah Hyde sort of reunion, or honestly would prefer to go after a guy like Justin Simmons.
Mhm.
But I think it's going to depend on what the Bills envision for guys like Cam Lewis and DeMar Hamlin. I personally love DeMar Hamlin as far as like what he's done for the awareness around, you know, the things he's done after his injury, but like on the football field, I just don't know that he's adding a ton of value to the team in
Mhm.
that regard. And like I'm saying that from a football standpoint. I'm not saying that for anything else other than that. And then the Bills love Cam Lewis too, right? Could he potentially be that fourth guy who kind of like takes DeMar Hamlin's roster spot at the end of this, and the Bills go with Rapp, Edwards, Bishop, and Lewis? If they sign a guy like Justin Simmons, you'd probably have to think that Cam Lewis and DeMar Hamlin are both done, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I just don't see another way around that unless you keep 5 safeties. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. This to me is one of those where like we might not know until day one of training camp how they're envisioning this group lining up.
Yeah, it's gonna be super interesting. And then even just talking about like depth, like this could be the year that DeMar Hamlin finally gets nudged off the Bills roster. It just might be too much line of scrimmage type of guys, because even when DeMar Hamlin filled the Micah Hyde role before his horrible injury that he sustained in Cincinnati, he was struggling a little bit because he's really not a center fielder. If you are looking for the center fielding trait, the closest person on the depth chart you're probably going to find is Cam Lewis. So I think Cam Lewis has that to his advantage. He's got special teams ability to his advantage. He got a 2-year deal from the Buffalo Bills, not a 1-year deal. So I really think Cam Lewis is locked into that fourth
Yep.
safety role.
Yep.
And if not, if they go 5 safeties, I think he's locked into that fifth safety role or backup nickel role, whatever you want to call it. I think Cam Lewis is one of those guys who's more locked than he is bubble.
Yeah, you're probably right, and it probably means they're not gonna go after a guy like Justin Simmons when some of that
Mhm.
money frees up because, one, I don't know that they'd have enough anyway to make that happen, but, um, the Micah Hyde thing's interesting, right? Because the Bills probably really could use him, honestly,
Mhm.
on the roster and, like, have Cam Lewis be that 5th guy, but, I mean, that might be more in Micah's court than the Bills' court.
Yeah. All right. Let's close out the show here this evening by talking a little special teams. Right now, it appears, based on the depth chart here, the roster here, Tyler Bass seems to be locked in as the Buffalo Bills kicker. With his contract situation, no duh. Like, despite
Mhm.
his struggles last season, it really does appear that Tyler Bass is going to be the Bills kicker in 2024, and it will be rather uncontested. If
Yep.
Bills Mafia does want competition, I'll tell you what, I've been watching a lot of UFL football lately. My new thing is I no longer watch UFL games live. I just watch the highlights on YouTube that are like condensed to like 15 minutes. And that's a
Mhm.
much better use of my time. Usually after my wife falls asleep, I'll on Saturday nights, sit there and watch UFL highlights. That's what I do. But the kickers are the stars of the UFL this
Oh,
season.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Matt McCrane killing it for DC, former NFL guy, and Jack Bates, the Michigan Panthers kicker. Have you seen this guy?
Yeah, Bates. I mean,
He just nutted one from 70. He's like 6 of 8 from 50 plus. He's got like 4-game winners, like 4 from 60 plus, like just an absolute monster. Hadn't kicked a field goal since high school.
mhm. I know Russell
So,
Brown's a big fan of his. He's like, "Get this guy in the Lions."
yeah. So, hey, if the Buffalo Bills, maybe they're just waiting on their kicker until the UFL season is over. Punter is where it's what is going on at punter, because you have Sam Martin returning, you have Matt Hawk signed to like a futures deal, like right at the end of the season. They have an unofficial but reported UDFA signing of a guy named Jack Browning, who's kicker punter versatile from San Diego State.
Just gonna roster
Alma
one.
mater of, this is going to be the most toxic punter battle of time this offseason. I think it's not going to be fun in training camp.
I mean, do you think it's like a legit competition, or do you think like
I've got a conspiracy theory. Do you want to hear my conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I do.
Wasn't Matt Hawk good for Tyler Bass for holding, or am I mistaking that with someone else? Matt Hawk was like a good holder, right?
Yes, he's a good holder. Yes.
My conspiracy theory, Tyler Bass's bad season was Sam Martin's fault. There just wasn't a vibe, right? Between the two of them. So maybe Matt Hawk was brought in because if Sam Martin and Tyler Bass can't work this thing out, we're just going to have to suck up another year of Matt Hawk sucking as a punter because the holding is just too important.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll just have
Josh
to
Allen,
suck
just
it up.
no more punts, Josh. You got to pick up every first down.
You got to pick up every first down. And hey, look, that was what, 2021 when he was the holder. So let's go take a look at how Tyler Bass fared in 2021. I think that was his best season.
That's the year he got the contract extension. Yeah.
Yeah. 2021, Tyler Bass field goal attempts 28 of 32 for an 87.5%. That's his career high for a season, was in 2021. So hey, is it a coincidence? I don't know. Conspiracy theory. I like it. I like it.
And then you obviously got the return man battle. Obviously, I think things will become clear in the preseason. We figure out all these new rules surrounding the kickoff. I think kickoff, Greg Tomsett's been talking about this. Maybe Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, those two guys could be involved in the kickoff, the new kickoff. You obviously have Isabella, you have Hamler, you have Shakir, you have Daquan Hardy. Kick returning competition will be really interesting. And then punt returning competition, Keon Coleman, Andy Isabella, Shakir, Hamler, Hardy. It'll be interesting to see who comes out on top.
I don't want Shakir anywhere near.
I don't
want
either.
Shakir anywhere near return duties.
I don't even think I want Keon Coleman returning anything. Like, I really hope Daquan Hardy wins the return role.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
That is the hope right there. And then, Andy Isabella has never looked comfortable doing it. I think he's just had to because his career hasn't worked out for him the way he wanted to as a receiver. But just because he's small and he's quick doesn't mean he's some ace return man. He didn't do it in college a lot. It was something that he had to pick up once he got to the pros, and he doesn't look the most comfortable doing it. So I think Daquan Hardy is that's the hope. That's the hope and dream right there in terms of the Buffalo Bills. Hot take, right? Like, I don't think the Buffalo Bills have fully taken advantage of going out and signing a return guy, right? Like, there's this new kickoff rule. It's supposed to be exciting. Guys aren't going to know what to do. You could really get an advantage in a game or two, like early on in the season when people are still figuring things out. And we're just trying to figure out who our returner is. And now maybe maybe I'm just dead wrong here and it's Daquan Hardy, but it'll be interesting to see come August how these guys fare in the return game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ty Johnson did the kick returns for a bunch last year, and like maybe he's figured out to not, with the new rules, like it's going to help him from not taking the ball out when he's 8 yards deep in the end zone. But hey, I really could envision a scenario where Ty Johnson's doing kick returns and Hardy's doing punt returns, and I think I'm generally okay with that for right now. But yeah, I mean, are you squeezing everything you can out of the possibilities with the new rules there? Maybe not, but also maybe the Bills have bigger problems to worry about than that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, upcoming next Monday, we're going to be reacting to the Buffalo Bills schedule and tiering their opponents. Maybe, Dave, we kind of screwed up having this show on a Thursday night when it's going to be the NFL schedule release night. Maybe we got to find an earlier time to set this broadcast, but we'll be back on Monday with our reaction to the schedule. This is not live, so it's not like we're just ignoring the new schedule.
Yeah, and maybe this is something we can release either like, maybe like a Thursday morning release. I don't know. We'll see.
Just beat the schedule, wave. But yeah, we will be back on Monday. We'll be reacting to the Buffalo Bills schedule. We're going to try to categorize or tier the Buffalo Bills opponents in 2024, sort of figure out the 50-50 games, the 60-40 games, things like that. Just try to categorize where we stand and sort of gauge how many wins we can expect from this Buffalo Bills team in 2024.
Check
All
the
right.
receipts. I did predict the correct win-loss record last year for the Bills.
Ooh, look at that. So we're definitely going to have to be listening to you on Monday when we break down that schedule. Any final thoughts before we head out of here, Dave?
No, I mean, look, the draft, like, this is like, we didn't get to really cover day 3. Obviously, the Roundup guys did a great job doing that. A lot of action happened on day 3. I saw a lot of teams that, like, saw the Dolphins and Patriots, and a lot of teams that I don't like pick a lot of guys that I do like. And I know it's hard sometimes to see that, but I like the draft class overall. I think I said on Twitter, it passed the vibe check for me. A lot of people, I think, are now coming around to it a bit more, especially on the Coleman pick. And I said, I think a lot of people's view of this draft is going to be based on whether they have a positive outlook for Keon Coleman or not. So super easy so far based on what we've seen in the embedded preview that we're going to be rooting so hard for this guy. So I really hope it works out for him. And yeah, we'll see.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We will see you Monday as we react to the Buffalo Bills schedule. So until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!